There's a moment, and I know you've felt it too, where every part of you knows. Your stomach tightens. Your breath goes shallow. Some quiet voice inside you says, "This is wrong." And then you do it anyway. That was me, 3 years ago, sitting across from a man who was not my boyfriend. I need to tell you this story because I spent a long time pretending it didn't happen. I told myself I was a victim of circumstance. I told myself I hadn't really chosen anything, things had just unfolded. But that's not true, and I think part of healing, part of actually growing, is being honest about the moments where you weren't the person you wanted to be. So here it is. His name was Daniel. We worked together at a small marketing firm in the city. He was smart, funny, and he paid attention in the way that people rarely do. When I spoke, Daniel actually listened. He remembered things. Small things. The kind of things my boyfriend of 4 years, Marcus, hadn't noticed in a long time. Marcus and I weren't in crisis. I want to be clear about that because it's important. We weren't fighting every night. He hadn't cheated on me. There was no dramatic reason for what I did. We had just become comfortable. And somewhere inside me, I had decided that comfortable meant dead. That's the lie I told myself. That the absence of fire meant the absence of love. Daniel and I started staying late at the office. Just colleagues. Just catching up on projects. We'd share food and talk about things that had nothing to do with work, our childhoods, our fears, the versions of ourselves we'd imagined becoming. It felt electric. It felt like being seen. And the whole time I knew. I knew what this was. I knew where it was heading. Not because I'm some expert in human psychology, but because I felt it in my gut every single time I stayed a little later, laughed a little louder, leaned in just slightly closer. My body was giving me information, and I was choosing to ignore it. I told myself I deserved to feel something. I told myself Marcus had taken me for granted. I told myself Daniel understood me in ways Marcus couldn't. Every one of those thoughts was a brick in a wall I was building between myself and my own accountability. The weekdays blurred together. There was a pattern forming that I refused to name. Late evenings. Shared glances. Conversations that went somewhere they shouldn't. The slow architecture of something I was pretending wasn't being built. I was present for all of it. That's the part no one wants to admit when they're on this side of the story. You're not sleepwalking. You're not drunk. You are fully, consciously, deliberately present, and making choices. Small ones, each defensible on their own. But accumulated into something that is entirely, undeniably yours. The night it happened, it was raining. That detail feels cinematic now, almost embarrassing, like the universe was trying to set a mood for a bad decision. We had finished a late project, and Danielle asked if I wanted to share a cab. I said yes. And then I said yes to the drink. And then I said yes to going upstairs. Each yes was a door I walked through with full awareness. I remember standing in his apartment, rain against the windows, feeling the most surreal combination of emotions I've ever felt in my life. Excitement. Guilt. Desire. Shame. They weren't separate, they were braided together into something I couldn't name. And I didn't turn around. The morning after, I walked back to my apartment in clothes that felt like evidence. Marcus was already up, making coffee, and he smiled at me the way he always did, that slow, warm smile, and I almost collapsed. Because in that moment I understood something that no one had ever told me, something I had to learn the worst possible way. The guilt doesn't arrive before the mistake. It arrives after. And it stays. I didn't tell Marcus that day. I told myself I needed time to process. I told myself maybe it was a one-time thing that didn't need to define anything. That's another lie we tell ourselves. that silence is protection when really it's just delayed destruction. The weeks that followed were a psychological fog. I became hyper-aware of every interaction with Marcus. The way he touched my hand over dinner. The way he trusted me completely, without suspicion, without any reason to doubt. His trust felt like a wound. And here is the part that I keep coming back to, the part that I think is actually worth examining if you want to understand what I did. I had known it was wrong before it happened. Not in the vague, abstract way we know that eating junk food is bad for us. I mean viscerally, specifically, with full clarity, I knew. And I did it anyway. Why? That question has taken me years to answer, and I'm still not sure I have the whole truth. But here's what I've come to understand: when we override our own moral compass, it's rarely because we've suddenly lost it. It's because we've convinced ourselves that what we want is more important than what we know. We build a narrative around our desire. We elevate the feeling and diminish the consequence. I told Marcus 6 weeks later. Not because I was noble. Not because honesty compelled me. I told him because I couldn't carry it anymore. Because the weight of what I'd done was compressing me from the inside, and I needed it out of my body even if that meant destroying everything. He didn't yell. That was the worst part. He just went very quiet, and then very still, and then he said, "I need you to leave." And I did. We didn't recover from it. I didn't expect us to. Some wounds aren't meant to heal into something stronger, they just change the shape of you permanently. Daniel and I never dated. Of course we didn't. Because what we had was never really about each other, it was about what I was avoiding, what I was missing, what I refused to address directly. When the forbidden element was removed, there was nothing underneath. I have spent a long time unpacking why I did what I did. I've sat with therapists and journaled and had honest, uncomfortable conversations with myself. And what I keep arriving at is this: knowing something is wrong doesn't always stop us from doing it. Our brains are extraordinarily good at building justifications. At constructing permission structures that let us do what we want while maintaining the identity of someone who wouldn't. We are capable of holding two completely contradictory beliefs at once: I am a good person and I am about to do something harmful, without the contradiction stopping us. Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance. I call it being human in one of the worst ways. The thing that I wish someone had told me, the thing I think about every time I meet someone standing at a similar crossroads, is this: the moment you recognize the feeling of knowing it's wrong, that moment is the actual decision point. Not after. Not when you're already in the cab. Not when you're already upstairs. The knowing is the moment. And what you do with it defines you more than the act itself. I'm not writing this to punish myself publicly. I've done enough of that privately. I'm writing it because I think a lot of people live in the gap between knowing and doing, and they feel alone there. They wonder if something is fundamentally broken in them. There isn't. You're not broken. But you do have to reckon with the truth that our choices, even the ones we make with full awareness, belong to us. Completely. Uncomfortably. Without the luxury of pretense. The version of me that stood in Daniel's apartment that night was not a victim of circumstance. She was a woman who chose. And the version of me now, the one who is still learning to live with that, has to keep choosing better, not because I've redeemed myself through suffering, but because I actually want to be who I said I was. That's the real second choice. Not going back and undoing the first one. But deciding, again and again, in all the small moments that follow, who you want to be. And making sure this time, when you hear that voice, the one that says this is wrong, you listen. There's something I want to add, because I think it matters: the aftermath is not linear. I wish I could tell you that the guilt arrived, sat with me for a period, taught me its lesson, and then departed. That's not how it worked. The guilt came in waves, sometimes weeks apart, sometimes daily, triggered by the most ordinary things. A song Marcus used to play, A restaurant we'd been to. The particular light of a Tuesday morning that felt exactly like the Tuesday mornings we used to spend together. Grief and guilt are not so different, it turns out. Both are forms of processing loss. Both require time. And both, if you sit with them long enough, will start to show you something about who you are that you didn't know before. What I know about myself now, years after that choice, is this: I was someone who had stopped being honest about what I needed. I had let a relationship drift past the point of honest communication and into the territory of quiet resentment, the resentment you get when two people stop telling the truth to each other and start managing an image instead. And rather than address that directly, I sought what I needed elsewhere. That's not a justification. It's a mechanism. The distinction matters because understanding the mechanism is what allows you to interrupt it the next time. The next time, for me, meant a different kind of relationship. One where I made a practice of saying hard things earlier, before they accumulated into something I'd decide I needed to escape from. It's not comfortable. Honest conversations about what you need never are. But the discomfort of a difficult conversation is nothing compared to the weight of a choice you made to avoid having it. If you're in a relationship right now where you've stopped saying the true things, where you've started managing and performing and coexisting rather than actually being present, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you that the gap between where you are and where you say you are will eventually demand to be closed, one way or another. It always does. Close it honestly. Before the choice you make to close it becomes one you have to carry. That's what I would go back and tell myself. That's what I'm still learning to live by.